Are you sick of trying to look into the new year and become a new you every single freaking year? You know it doesn't work. I know it doesn't work. So I have written a book about the antithesis of this, some slapdash self-help, some look at your silly beliefs, a chance to shake out your pockets of what you think you might want out of your life and inspect whether that is actually what you want out of your life and what you care about. And we go through every section of your life and just look at all of those topics and see what might matter and what doesn't matter as much. It's called Half-Arsed Human and it's out on the 19th of December. And if you subscribe to this channel, this might be good news because it would seem that you don't mind the sound of my voice. Maybe some of you even like the sound of my voice. I am reading the audiobook. That is going to be me performing it. It's going to be available everywhere at the same time on the 19th of December. And I thought I would document the process for you of what it was like behind the scenes for those audiobook lovers among you, what it was like, how I did it, what were the things that surprised me about it, what are the things that shocked me, and how long does it take, how many people are involved. If you're feeling nosy about how audiobooks are created, this is going to be the video for you. I have poured myself a very big warm mug of tea. I actually immediately lied to you. Craig has poured me a very big warm mug of tea. I've got my cozy big cardigan on and let's just chat about it. This is going to be a very cozy video. If you haven't guessed from the title of the book, I'm not really up for trying that hard. So if you also want to relax with me and just put me on in the background, that is perfect. And get used to the sound of my voice for when you listen to like hours and hours of it for the audiobook. So I have never recorded a whole audiobook before, but I'll put my hands up and say I have been in one audiobook before. I read a third of an audiobook of a book called The Beauty of the End by Debbie Howes. You can look it up. It's on Audible and every platform under the name Lena Normington. It was about 8 years ago and I was playing a 15-year-old in therapy. So I have had some experience of doing audiobooks before, but this definitely felt like a completely different experience. For one, I wasn't in London. I don't live in London, and thankfully the publishers were like, should we book you a studio a little bit nearer to you? And I was like, that would be fantastic. So I went to Birmingham Podcast Studios in the centre of Birmingham to record the audiobook. Now, Birmingham Podcast Studios is really cool because it's actually in a big warehouse behind Birmingham Moor Street Station, if you know anything about Birmingham. Birmingham is made up of these converted warehouses, as like most post-industrial cities in the UK are. And this one's really cool because it houses Radio, which is like an independent Birmingham radio station that I didn't know anything about, but now I've discovered, and it's discovered that it's really cool. It also houses a beautiful bookshop, which of course I bought a book from. This is the book that I bought. Isn't it beautiful? It's a long novel in verse about landlords. Classic. It's got a really nice cafe, really friendly people, and it also houses the offices for Friends of the Earth. So imagine my ecstatic feeling when I walked up the stairs to the podcast studio and I was faced with lots of different flags and hand-painted posters saying like, stop HS2, protect the planet, down with fossil fuels. And I was like, I'm in my place. So the studio itself, I went in for 3 whole days, and in the studio it was just me, Paul, who was at the controls. He was the person like controlling what was recorded and the levels and all of that. And Lola, who was meticulously checking the book as I read it aloud. In fact, I recorded a little studio tour, so maybe I'll play you that now before we go on with it. So this is the little coffin that I've been recording the audiobook in. It's very cozy, kind of like a little womb. This is the haunted light that Paul presses when he wants me to say things and start and stop. This very bright iPad is what I've been reading off for the book. Nice little lamp, some notes for myself of where I think I've gone wrong, or maybe I've made some accidental typos in the book. We've got some Red Bull, some Pringles, some other things. Over here is where Paul works. I don't know what any of these buttons do. Can you explain it to a layman?
This one does the light.
Ooh, that's the most important thing, is the light. And then on this screen was like a PDF of the book, so we can all follow along with what's been going on. And then Lola has been checking all of our progress. So every time I've said something wrong, Lola's been like, stop, that's wrong, go back. So she's been following along and also picking up loads of typos in the book that we'd completely missed until this very last moment. Yeah. So we really hope the book hasn't gone to print yet. It'll be fine. And then over here, there's just some chairs where we relax. Not that we have relaxed at all in the history of this audiobook. And that's the whole studio. Cool. Now you've seen the studio, I've got a few questions that people asked me over on Instagram that I wanted to answer about the process, and then I'll tell you 3 of my most prominent discoveries from my arduous and uplifting experience of recording the audiobook. So somebody asked how many people are involved. Well, you've just seen there's 3. There's also Rabia, who is in charge of the audiobook in-house at Hachette. So I had a call with her a few weeks prior to recording, and she goes through the whole manuscript of what is actually going to be printed in the physical book and checks that it will translate into audio okay. So she went through every single diagram in the book and either wrote it out in a way that I could just describe what was happening in the diagram in a seamless way, or just said, do we need to explain this? It will be attached in the PDF of the audiobook anyway. So I went through all of those notes and checked those. Another thing that needs to happen before you do the audiobook is making sure that every time you reference the physical book, you change that to the audiobook. So in my book, I've said stuff like, turn the page to find out more. You can't say that, so you have to change it to something else for the audiobook. When you picked up this book in the shop needs to be when you stumbled upon this audiobook or something else like that. Like, it needs to be different so that it's more relevant to the book. And instead of when you read this sentence, you can be like, when you heard this sentence, like all of those things, all of that needs to be meticulously gone through. So Rabia had done that and then sent it to me. I'd gone through it and said like, yes, I agree, or no, I'd like it phrased more like this because this sounds like it's more in my tone of voice. That kind of thing. Then, as you met, Paul and Lola, 2 people were involved in the recording at the same time as me. And then I imagine there's other people in-house who will check and like re-edit. We kind of edited as we went. So that's another question that somebody asked. Mistakes, how are they corrected? So Paul was editing the audiobook as we went, which is actually really efficient, and I hadn't thought about it that way. I don't think that's the way I did it last time I did audiobooks, but I think he called it punch and roll. If I'm wrong, I'll put it on screen. Punch and roll, which is a system where you record, and when you make a mistake, you stop straight away in the moment and you play it back, and you go back to a point in the audio recording where everything was fine and you carry on. So I would basically like read the book aloud with my headphones in. Paul would be able to talk to me through the headphones, and when I made a mistake, either I would notice or Lola or Paul would notice, and we'd run it back in my headphones to the moment where just before I'd made the mistake, and then I would, when the light came on, come in on cue and finish the sentence so that I was saying it in the same tone of voice and like the phrase of the sentence still made sense and I could hear myself talking in my ears, so I made sure it was okay. Does that make sense? They found that by changing the recipe so that you also had to add an egg, making the recipe... Sorry, I've just switched 2 lines together. Sorry. Making the process harder for the customer. Punch and roll. Sounds violent. Actually very relaxing. So Paul was doing that as we were going, and sometimes if I just paused for too long, he'd be like, can we go back and do that again so it flows better, and that kind of thing. And there were often moments where I was like, I've said that sentence weird, I've made that sound weird. So it does, like, just even though the sentence technically makes sense, the way like my intonation and diction has made it like it's changed the meaning of the sentence sometimes. Like what words you emphasize change the meaning of it. So lots of things like that, we'd be constantly kind of going back over it and being like, no. But it is a lot of pressure because most of the time you just do 1 take, and if it's fine, you just do that. There's not like, you don't do 10 takes of every sentence. As long as you've read it out and it's coherent and it's correct, like you just move on to the next sentence. So that's weird because if you think about it, I've just like, there's lots of phrases I've just said once and then that's just like indelibly in history forever now in that book, I guess. Let's not think about it too hard. Another question is, do you practice? So I, in the editing process, read the book out loud to myself. Some chapters several times, but all of them at least once, because that is how you catch the errors. And I also think that's how you check that your tone matches the whole way through the book. You don't want to become too formal in some sections and then really informal in other sections. And also it just catches anything that sounds weird when you say it out loud, you know. So that would really help me. I don't think all authors do that, but I very much, because it's also in my tone of voice, it really helped for me to read it out loud. And because I don't have any like characters or anything, I didn't need to practice like different voices or accents or anything. Like it's just me talking. So in that way it was really straightforward. And while I'd practiced that, and I read the book a lot of times by now, You better believe that I've added like a lot of them to my story graph. Any time that I've read the book from start to finish, I added it to my reading stats for the year because I think that that is valid. I am my most read author of the year this year, and I think that's okay. But I also reread every chapter itself differently, so I didn't count those. Anyway, yes, I had practiced. Can you do this for a living? Probably. I got paid to do my audiobook, and if I did that every single day, yes, that would add up to a good, pretty decent freelance salary. However, I imagine that people who are professional audiobook readers aren't booked back to back for like audiobooks every single day. And I don't know if your voice could last as well. I imagine if you're professionally trained, it could, but it would still hurt. I imagine you can do it full time, but I don't know how many people really do. From all the kind of stuff I've learned about in publishing and overheard, like most people are doing like other acting gigs or other stuff, renting out their voice or their presenting skills in other ways to make up like a whole career. But yeah, that's it. I'm sure some people do it full time though. Do you read the book in order? Yes, you do read the book in order, but we did the whole book and then at the end we went and we did that, you know, right at the beginning of audiobooks where you go like, welcome to this audiobook of Half-Assed Human by Lena Norms. Like that, the intro bit, like I recorded right at the end of the process, and also the acknowledgements and like the dedication for the book, that was all recorded at the end. But everything else was recorded chronologically because I think that's good. It helps you get into the flow of the book and hopefully makes it feel more natural. Like, why would you record it out of order? Because people are going to read it in order, so you might as well record. Anyway, the 3 things I noticed about recording. So generally the first one was just how tiring it is. When I've done it before, I only think I did a day and a half, and it was just like a lot slower pace. We didn't have that much material to cover, and in this one it just felt like there was so much to cover, and it's a very weird mix. I think it's more disorientating than it is actually tiring. It's just a weird mix of like, you're in a dark, sensory deprived room with like a little lamp. That's very relaxing. You're in a very relaxing situation. Sensory underload, if anything. You are staring at an iPad all day, because mainly audiobook readers do it on an iPad, because if you think about it, if you have paper, you have to cut out any sound when you turn a piece of paper. Like paper is a very like noisy substance. So having an iPad that you just swipe through means that I wouldn't have to like pause to turn the page or anything. I could just continually keep reading. But that is a bit tiring on your eyes, just staring at an iPad all day. I kind of thought about it as like, oh, well, I read books all the time, like for hours on end, so it'll be fine. But it is definitely more like you're performing. So you're performing for like 7 or 10 hours a day. So that's just like inherently a little bit tiring in itself. And then also it's just like the low level of alertness you need. I would compare it to long distance driving, which, well, all of you know, I don't have a driving license. I have, with a responsible passenger in the passenger seat, driven long distances. Like I've driven from Coventry to Aberystwyth and back several times. So I know what it's like to do like long distance, slow, like dual carriageway drives. And it's like that thing of, you have to kind of be alert enough so that you'll notice if there's any mistakes or things going on the road, but not so alert that you exhaust yourself and you start making mistakes because you're like too hyper tense and like clenched. The way I dealt with that was in the end, because you can't really be seen that much in the booth. I started just doing really silly gesticulations while I was talking. So I'd be like, here's the thing about that, is that when we think about the way veganism works, we can't be doing that. You know what I mean? Like I was doing that which is fine most of the time, but occasionally I hit the table or something because I was like going too wild. But mainly it was fine, and that kept my attention. I'm starting to do it now. I need to stop. So when you listen to the audiobook, if you think you can hear or picture me doing that, I am doing that. It was also sometimes hard to keep the pace level. Paul and Lola were checking for that, so I would keep the same speed the whole way through the audiobook, so that when you inevitably speed it up on your audiobook app, like the same results will come out for any chapter. But it was also hard to not get too fast when I became passionate, because I've written about things that I really care about, like fast fashion and being a half-assed vegan and stuff like that. So I was getting quite passionate, and that made me speed up a lot. And also it made me stop remembering that I'm not a fish and I can't breathe out of my neck, and I had to take breaths. So I think sometimes I got a bit too immersed in my little rants and had to like take a step back because of that as well. So it's basically like, it's very exhausting because you have to keep your temperament and your tone at both an interesting and consistent level throughout the day. So that was quite hard, but I think I got the hang of it in the end, and I did really, really enjoy it as well. It was like a weird thing of like, you know, you do something really hard, but at the end you're like, that was great. That's how it felt. Magnification was the second thing that I really noticed, that I had an inkling it would be that way, because obviously I work with audio equipment all the time, but not this kind of audio equipment and not at this level. And I, you know, every single mouth and smack movement, Craig will tell you, has to listen to a lot of those when he edits these videos, is picked up, and every gurgle in your tummy. A lot of the times we had to break for lunch early because I was like, I'm just too hungry to continue, and it's ruining the audio recording. So yeah, poor Paul was very intimately familiar with the sound of the gurgles in my throat and the involuntary little rumbles that happen and hiccups and that kind of thing. Maybe a few burps. I think there were still hiccups. I stand by the fact that they were hiccups. So that's something you just have to get used to. I was surprised though that sometimes I was just like, to keep myself engaged and like I was just kind of absent-mindedly thinking, I was like rubbing a little bit of the fabric on my skirt together while I was recording for a little bit, and then he had to stop and was like, what's that sound? And I was like, oh, it's just me fiddling with my dress. So even stuff like that gets picked up, so you become very conscious of like everything you might be touching or moving, and I had to take off all my rings and stuff like that. Also just like the micro management of my own mannerisms. Like I think I sometimes change my accent when I've been talking for too long. Either I get too posh or I get a little bit more how I used to talk at school, which is a bit more Coventry. And like I was noticing myself doing that during the audiobook. And again, I don't know if that comes out or if anybody will be able to detect it, but I feel like my various, everybody has this to a certain extent, like various fluctuations of accent, because I was talking to no one. I was like, what's going on? Sometimes I'm saying things very more like this, and then sometimes I'm saying them a little bit more like this. And that was something that I was like constantly monitoring, and I think it's fine and consistent, but I would encourage you to download the audiobook and see if you can detect differences in my accent as we go through. But I think it was fine. But again, it's like that, low level, you have to be conscious all the time of it. Mistakes. So again, I had like this idea in my head that I was like, I read all the time, so I'm going to be great at this. And I've read aloud quite a bit, but not for this long. And I realised that actually maybe being a reader in my head might actually make me worse at this sometimes, because when you're skim reading things or when you're reading really fast, I think your brain kind of does a little predictor trick where it predicts what the next word will be, or sometimes it scans a whole phrase and like kind of fills in the blanks a little bit. So I started doing that as I was reading, and I was like saying the most wild words that weren't the words on the page, because the word that had preceded it usually is followed by that word. I'm trying to think of an example now and I can't think of one. But yeah, and also kind of just, it has to really match because if you're buying the audiobook, you're still buying the text. So the text in every edition should be as similar as possible. So say if I say they've in one version of the book and they have in another version of the book, they're technically different versions. So you have to make sure that even if you're just skim reading something, those small details need to be the same, and every pluralized thing needs to be pluralized in the audiobook too. And there was a few moments like that where I was like, why is my brain just meshed two words together? That was silly. I wrote down some of the other mistakes I made actually that I thought were quite funny, just my brain just changing a word for no reason. Tentacle became tentricle. Favorites became favorites. my vegan favorites. I said paternal when I meant to say parental, so I was like, am I a bigot? Universally is a new word that I think we should all start using. And plandemic is something my brain just pulled out of nowhere and started saying instead of pandemic. So that's concerning. Too much Fox News my brain is secretly watching while I am asleep. There are also like words that I have put in the book that I'll admit I've used a lot on paper and like read a lot about, but have I said them to people out loud very often? Not really. So there are a lot of times where I was like, how do I pronounce that word? So that was also very humbling, but not too many of those. And they're not even complicated words. It was just like me being silly and like overthinking it and being like, oh God, Am I even saying that word right? Am I an idiot? Yes is the answer. So yeah, they're the 3 things that surprised me about it. And one question as well that people asked a lot was, how long does it take to hours on tape? We did 3 days in total. We did 10 till 5 the first 2 days. And then on the last day, we still had a lot to go. So we did 9 till 7 with a 20-minute break. And that was very intense, but we made it happen. We did it. So I think that's 23 hours in total. And I don't know how long the audiobook's going to be, but it ain't going to be that long. I think it's going to be like 6 or 7 hours long, maybe 8. We'll see. So that's the kind of ratio we're talking about. And that's like actually insane when you think about some of the books that I read are like 35 hours long. They must have been in the studio for like 2 weeks. I also asked my friend who is a trained actor, he trained Rose Bruford Acting School and is now currently a head teacher, to send me some voice notes with exercises and advice on how to keep my voice going for the 3 days, because he's obviously using his voice all the time professionally and knows how to do it. Mostly I just hummed a lot before, like when I was walking to the station or walking from the station to the studio, I just like low level hum to myself, like to just like warm up those chords. And I did a few like stretches and a few little phrases, like, you know, the ones, the tongue twisters. So can you imagine an imaginary menagerie manager imagining managing an imaginary menagerie? Stupid, like, you know, theatre kid stuff like that, and that did help. But I think by the 3rd day I was like, I am not a professional, like my voice does hurt a bit. So yeah, there was that. So there you have it, the story of me and the audiobook. If it sounds up your street, I have some pre-order links in the description to order below. So if you're watching this before the 19th of December, I cannot impress to you how much it would mean to me if you pre-ordered the audiobook on your favorite audiobook app before it's released. One, it means that you don't need to think about it again. You don't need to remember to buy it later. You're giving yourself a little present for the future. It's going to be brilliant. It also means that like it gets a lot more attention on the audiobook. It gets more in front of more people's eyes, and it means that those sales all go through on the same day, which means that the book might chart. So all of that really helps. So if it sounds like it's something that might help you and you are either a chronic procrastinator or a chronic perfectionist, I hope this book will be for you. It's very much in the tone of this whole channel. So if you like this channel, I can pretty much guarantee you'll like the book too. Thank you so much for watching. This video is made possible by the Gumption Club, who tip me per video to make sure these videos keep happening. And I really hope you like it. We'll see. Frog log out.